The Resident Evil franchise couldn't be in a more questionable state. After controversially putting a bigger emphasis on action, the series took a nosedive in quality last year with the abundantly disappointing Resident Evil 6. But an RE game that hasn't garnered such controversy was Revelations on handhelds. In hopes to appease fans, Capcom is porting that game for the much larger console market. So what's the verdict on Resident Evil Revelations? Let's find out.
Shit! Why the hell don't these things stay dead?
Revelations opens with series veteran Jill Valentine and newcomer Parker being sent to investigate the whereabouts of fellow BSAA member Chris Redfield in the middle of the Mediterranean. Their search finds them on an abandoned cruise ship, the Queen Zenobia, a ship more troubled than a carnival cruise. A new type of bioorganic weapon, the Ooze, has infected the ship. From there, the story bounces between multiple perspectives across the globe and back through time. Ultimately, the story boils down to the same song and dance as the past few Resident Evil games. A madman is trying to infect the world with a new virus. It's just too predictable at this point. The only difference is, you have to figure out who that madman is. As the title suggests, there are plot twists abound, but in the end, the story won't matter much if you're not already heavily invested in the series. But the game does lead into Resident Evil 5 nicely. What can be a sore spot at times is the voice acting. Cheesy writing has always been a hallmark of the series, but with certain characters here, it's worse than ever. There's a huge disconnect between when the game is trying to be serious and comical. I'm not joking, there's a character whose call sign is Jackass. It's embarrassingly fitting.
Almost. I had her until the very end, but I lost her near the... Hey! You think I'm a stalker, don't you?
If you felt the gameplay of Resident Evil 6 was haphazard at best, you'll be glad to know Revelations is a return to form. The gameplay is much closer to the Resident Evil 4 and 5 playbook, albeit with a far less beefy shooting model. You can play the game with controls mimicking that of Resident Evil 4, but unfortunately, there's no laser sight option. Your new abilities and tools include a less than intuitive evading mechanic and the Genesis scanner, which allows you to find hidden items and scan dead BOWs for the occasional herb, but it's hardly a compelling feature. The upgradable arsenal is mostly standard, with the exception of certain explosives, like the BOW decoy that lures enemies towards it before detonating. The game progression is a refreshing change of pace. Outside of the linear flashback sections that set you loose with tons of ammo, gone is the linear level design of the past few entries in the series. You have an entire ship to explore where you gradually earn keys that give you access to new areas. Yes, this does mean backtracking and occasional puzzle solving. Once you get into the swing of things, you realize this is far closer to what Resident Evil should play like than 6 could ever hope to be. Revelations is generally far from the steep challenge of RE4, but the occasional boss does put up a fight, especially the final battle that will brutalize you if you don't prepare weapon upgrades accordingly. With that said, while the game can be creepy enough at times, it's no Dead Space 2 in terms of horror. An occasional jump scare would have gone a long way, and the underwater sections are as lousy as you'd expect. The 7 to 8 hour campaign is a fun one and can be played again in New Game Plus, and you can tackle the new Infernal mode, which significantly ups the enemy count. Despite the fact that you have a partner at your side for the majority of the game, there is no campaign co-op mode a la 5 and 6. However, you can play alone or with a friend in the Raid mode, presenting an arcadey and role-playing twist on levels recycled from the campaign. Raid is a surprisingly addictive feature that has an appeal not unlike Mass Effect 3's co-op, as you level up and acquire new gear, characters, and upgrades to tackle more difficult levels. While it's far from the intensity of the old Mercenaries mode, it has an appeal all its own despite being a grind. But the presentation does suffer from being a port of a handheld game. The graphics aren't that much farther ahead of the HD edition of Resident Evil 4. The cutscenes and character models can look decent, but the environments not so much. Many outdoor areas in particular look terrible. Many concessions were taken that wouldn't have been if the game were built from the ground up on the console. There are noticeable clipping issues, the environments aren't in the least destructible, and the frame rate stutters when loading new areas. Further, disturbing imagery isn't so because of low detail, the lip syncing is poor, and there are numerous loading screens which are brief but everywhere. The music is good, but the dramatic score will loop even when nothing is going on. Also, what's up with the episodic structure complete with previously on recaps? It's far from necessary, though you can skip them. With all of this said, the claustrophobic interiors aren't half bad given the circumstances of the port and should please fans, but there is a reason the game is $10 cheaper than the norm. Resident Evil Revelations shows Capcom hasn't completely lost sight of the franchise's roots, but the game probably should have been a $30 download instead of a $50 retail package. It looks cheap because it is, yet Revelations is a functional Resident Evil game, just don't expect the console version to blow you away.